just want to share. Oh, there it is. Got it. Now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit and we know where we're headed today, I just wanted to share two things. I draw heavily on an architecture metaphor, and I want to, in this planning series that I do, because it really is about building the structures. And I draw on the architecture metaphor, and I give credit to both ministry architects. You may know about them. They use that metaphor, so I didn't invent it. But it also happens that my oldest daughter is going to graduate with her architecture degree. And so I love thinking about architecture, and especially learning from her the ways that the structures you create, in this case, an image of one of her affordable housing concept designs, how that structure can really create the space for engagement and joy and connection with others. So there's a preschool in this little, again, it's a concept, but an idea for an affordable housing complex. So I love talking about my kids. So there we go. So that's where the architecture comes from. And then because I've worked with people, Kathy Pittenger and others from Michigan, and I think I presented to you maybe 2 years ago, I'm just going to start by saying I have some assumptions about you. I hope that are true. But I know that if you've been working with Kathy long, you've probably talked about your why. So you probably understand what your purpose for ministry is. If not, send me a chat and I'll direct you to some resources. Also, I think you all are excellent at making sure you have a child safety policy in place. If you don't, safety first, that would be what I would prioritize in planning. Don't pass go until you have that in place. And then because also you work with Kathy and the good people of Michigan, you probably understand that idea of digital curation through pathways and playlists and making things available to people online. And then another assumption that I'm making is not only have we been through COVID and all of that, we are in the middle of Protestant church decline, which we all know about. And those, I think we're all United Methodist, right? We also have seismic shifts in our denomination. So all of those things exist. I'm not going to necessarily go into them, but I just wanted to let you know that those are the things that I was thinking about as I designed this for you. Nod at me if that sounds about right. Okay, great. So I'm jumping in a little farther ahead than I would with a different group. And I really like to ground our planning in our why, or our mission, the Great Commission, from Matthew 28, make disciples, and in the Methodist world, we say, make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, which I believe comes from the Great Commission. And I like to look at this passage and think about the relationships, because for me, planning and ministry is all about relationships, and planning creates the structure for that. So if we had a lot more time, I would ask people to just, kind of name the places you see relationship, but take a look at this with fresh eyes, and notice where you see relationships. Now, the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. So as I've done this with other groups, there's the relationship between Jesus Christ and the disciples. There's the relationship between the disciples and the world. There's the relationship within the Trinity itself, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Relationships are everywhere a part of our ministry and our why and Jesus's Great Commission. All right. And so again, the idea behind this structure is to create the container, the ability to nurture relationships within our ministry in our churches. And I'll say a little bit about what when I think about relationships. This is an idea that I came up with, I don't know, few years ago. And I thought about the type of ministry leader I wanted to be. And I saw in different congregations and even my own that, sometimes you'd have this sort of bow tie structure where maybe the leader in charge of coffee hour, was really, he really held that ministry pretty tightly. And then the people attached to that ministry, were connected through that person. The problem with a model like that, wherever it is, lay, clergy, ministry leader, is that we all at some point move on to either to a new ministry or to a new church, or none of us are here forever. And so when you take out that center leader from a bow tie, what I call the bow tie structure, when you take that person out, then the relationships there's no structure for relationships anymore. It's not the strongest. So I think about it in terms of a network, right? Where we're creating a network of relationships so that if one person is no longer part of that network, there are still strong enough connections to sustain ministry and sustain congregations. So that's sort of a little bit about how I think about my leadership. And today we're going to be leaning heavily into that ministry architects model. This comes from them. They call these things the simple machines. If you're going to build a structure, you need some tools, and the simple machines will help you do that. So we're going to talk about database, calendar, volunteer needs, communication plan, and not so much curriculum today, but that's what we'll be talking about. So before I just dive into those machines, let me just offer a prayer. Eternal God, thank you for this day and these minutes to step away from the doing of ministry and the tasks that await us today, so that we have an opportunity to plan and create with your Spirit systems and structures for the work of your kingdom. Thank you for each person gathered here. Continue to bless their work and their ministry and their families. Where there is challenge, guide the way forward. Where there is uncertainty, make a way through. Where there is grief or exhaustion or frustration, be comfort and strength. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, we're going to dive in. So people are on the move. So if we're thinking about organizing people, we need to be aware that lots of people move around. We live in a very mobile society. Also, people have busy schedules. Several of you alluded to that in our opening sort of question, right? Kids' schedules are wild. There's a wealth of activities for kids to do, and they're often on Sunday mornings when usually we are trying to do ministry. And then we know that there are these big church attendance shifts. In my context, we've had a huge influx of people from the city to the suburbs. That's driven by COVID. So there's a lot of people moving around. And so in order to maintain connection with them, we need to know something about them and need to be able to contact them. So the goal of a database or whatever people management system you use, it can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet for some congregations and as mighty a tool as something like Realm or Planning Center for other churches. But the goal of all of those is really keeping connected. And so as you think about planning your ministry year and the people that will be involved in your ministry, think about how are you going to collect info from both new people and existing people. Maybe there's been a change in address, or maybe a child has developed an allergy that you need to know about. So you got to collect that info, and then you need to input it into whatever system you have for keeping that data and making sure that that gets shared with the right people in your organization. There are births and deaths, and we send out all kinds of communications in church about stewardship or, event planning and, all the things. And there's nothing worse than somewhat for me anyway, for someone saying, I let you know that this event happened in our life, and then yet you still didn't update your database, and people don't feel seen. So making sure that everybody has that information. And then following up with specific people, new visitors or pastoral events that you find out in the process of collecting this info. So just a really high level overview about the participants in your ministry and how to make sure you have the simple machine tool of people management. And then thinking about data sources, if you have some that aren't on this list, go ahead and type them in the chat if you like, but you may be doing some sort of yearly registration form or a special event registration. Some churches like ours, we do a directory update like, hey, this is the information we have on file. Let us know if it's not right. We do that every year. There are visitor contact cards, or maybe you have a connect card in your pews where you get information. And then you have also attendance of online and in-person events. So these are some of the main data sources, information about people that we get. I don't see anybody adding any others, but just think about where is this information coming from and then how you're going to process it through that cycle. All right, we're moving fast today. Y'all okay? All right. So then there's also the other kind of people in our ministry, besides the participants, are the leaders, right? So equipping volunteers and leaders for this networked ministry model. So you've got different people that are part of your ministry team. You're probably an architect or a general contractor. An architect is making sure that the vision and the purpose and the goals are aligned with whatever ministry you're building. The general contractor is organizing the people and the main projects for that. And then you've got skilled craftspeople. These would be, the people that hang drywall or the painters in a building project. But for us, they might be, the volunteer greeters or the teachers or, the coffee hour leaders, whoever those people are. And then you've got in our case, mostly children, right, who are a part of that space as well. So as you think about these three sort of leadership positions, it's helpful to make a list of the people that you need and the specific skills that you need. So we just did this with my children's ministry team on Sunday, and we said, okay, we need someone to be in charge of outreach projects. You all would like to do family, like pack a kit or make sandwiches. We would love to do that with you, but we need someone who has the gifts and skills to do that. So we identified some roles in ministry that are mostly the skilled craftspeople kind of level of role. And this is a wonderful book. You're probably familiar with it because I know Kathy works very closely with John Roberto, and I get to do that sometimes too, which is always a joy. But he's got, sort of a set of leadership competencies that not only do we have to invite people into ministry, but we have to develop the competencies of leaders and also the culture. So I won't read through all of this, but the slides will be available. This is something for you all to know about in terms of, what kinds of things you might need your leaders to be able to do in ministry, and design networks is one of them, for example. And then I'll point you to this other resource. Ministry Architects has the book Sustainable Children's Ministry. And they have this idea of recruiting on purpose. And I was very skeptical when I first heard about this, probably, 8 or 9 years ago. They said, you should start recruiting your volunteers for the coming school year in February. And I thought, that's never gonna work. Who's thinking about September and February? Well, and I'm a parent, and you know what? I'm thinking about September and February. So center this process in prayer. Start early. Now is not too early. Maybe you've already started doing this work, but make a list of the needs. What are the roles that we just talked about in your ministry? And then a list of people who might have those gifts and skills and time for ministry. We've just recently looked back at what has our attendance been, and who have been the people that have been showing up, a lot. And if they're showing up a lot and they haven't been invited into a leadership position, what might engage them in being a leader in ministry. And then you take your needs list and your prospects list and you merge them together and you invite people intentionally. Some people find that bulletin announcements or pulpit announcements work well. I prefer the asking people directly. We've noticed that you're here a lot and you really seem to have a joy when when you work with younger kids. We're wondering if you would be willing to teach our preschool class 8 Sundays next year, and just be really specific. And people will say yes. And then you have the benefit of getting on their calendar first. Someone said, it's a very distracted world. It is. But you can win the calendar game by being first. Organized parents will put it on their calendar and will generally be, if they say yes, they'll stay committed. Oops, I just closed the wrong window. There we go. So I happen to work with a wonderful colleague who's really great at making sure that this sort of after you have your leaders recruited, you also need to think about how you're equipping them, thanking them, creating this culture where they feel like every time they show up, they do something meaningful, and they're growing in their relationship with other people. They're growing in their relationship with the church, and hopefully they're growing in their relationship with Christ at the same time. So again, this is from Lifelong Faith, but treating your leaders as partners, honoring their gifts, and making sure you appreciate and recognize them. If you are doing these things, you'll have in my experience, you'll have a lot better volunteer retention. Creating this idea of a culture of value. What you do here matters, and we're glad you're doing it. And people if people feel that way, they're more likely to show up and put things on their calendar and commit to saying yes, because people want to do things that matter to their kids and for others. So speaking of calendaring and winning the calendar game, there's a few different types of calendars that I like to think about in terms of ministry, and I'll go really briefly over these. I think some of you may have, I have like a curriculum planning calendar or lesson planning calendar on my website. It's free. It's a Google Doc. You just make a copy of it and then you can edit it, whatever works for you. But I have a lot of calendaring. They're kind of my favorite thing. So, but here's just a brief overview of calendars. You need a yearly calendar. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have started working on your calendar for the next school year? Yeah, I figured. You all are amazing. Right. So you know what that is. There's this idea of a preventative maintenance calendar. This comes from Ministry Architects. You can go on their website. This has been a game changer for me, because thinking about annually submitting your budget request on time, right? That's something that often falls off the radar until someone reminds me, and then I'm sort of last minute doing it. But I have an electronic calendar that reminds me, the month that I need to do that work. So I have time to do that well, even if the Budget and Finance Committee forgets to ask me to do it. Or never asks me to do it, which sometimes happens, right? And they just do it for me, which is never ideal. Take these preventative maintenance, take this list and look at it and go ahead and calendar it in your calendar for the year. And then there's this idea of a work week rhythm, and then there's content calendars, which you all are really familiar with in terms of lesson planning and communications. But here's a little detail. As you work on your yearly calendar, you're probably doing all of these things. You're starting off with the important unmovable things like Easter and Christmas and all of those things. You're thinking about church events, the rummage sale that you have to have every year, and it always happens on the third Sunday in June or whatever that is. Community events like prom or just major things that are part of your community life. And then leadership events. So thinking about your volunteer leaders, when are you commissioning them? When are you training them? When are you thanking them? Going ahead and putting that on your calendar the year ahead so that you know that it will get done. You've got the preventative maintenance things, and then you've got your, weekly Sunday school, weekly youth group, those weekly activity. And then the one that I often don't get to is communications, especially for big events like our big Christmas pageant, right? I always hope that I put the start date for communications on my calendar. Like that's my goal for this year. By the end of May, I'm going to say, all right, the date that I need to start communicating big events is, and it's usually 4 or 6 weeks before the actual event, so that I give a little more prep time to that. And then the only other thing I want to say about the yearly calendar is about my care and appreciation for all of you. Put your vacation on your calendar the first round. Take care of yourself. I have a big graduation this year with my daughter. It happens to coincide with my time at Virginia Theological Seminary. So I told my congregation and the important leaders that I was going to be out pretty much the entire month of June this year. That wasn't ideal, and I knew that, but I told them a year ago, and I'm not moving it, and I'm not missing my daughter's graduation, and we'll figure out a way through that. So make sure you put your time on there and your family time on there at the top. All right, I already did the preventative maintenance calendar. As you're thinking about caring for yourself and your loved ones, I love this idea of a rhythmic work week calendar. I don't always write it down, but I do generally have a rhythm to the week. Another colleague of mine said, think about things in 4-hour blocks. So if you work full time, then you have 10 4-hour blocks each week. What are you doing in each of those 4-hour blocks? So Sundays, worship and Sunday school kinds of things. On Monday morning, my time is generally reserved for lesson planning for the coming week, gathering materials, contacting volunteers, whatever it needs to do to keep that weekly ministry going. And then I've got time during the week where I lead Bible studies and have staff meeting. And then I've got some times that are just on where I've got pastoral care or just the tasks that come up. I've got time for those. And then there's this idea of balcony time. This is my growing edge. Every week, I think I want to just have an hour to think about, step back and think, how are things going? Are we on track? Have we gone down a rabbit hole? Do we have enough resources? Are we thinking ahead? Often that gets lost in the shuffle. And so I'm being really authentic and honest with you. But I have found when you can step out of that busy rush of ministry and actually think about the bigger picture, it's really helpful. So maybe it can't be weekly, but can it be every other week or monthly? How many of you feel like you have time to do that step back? No, yeah, I'm saying no, right? Okay, so we all have the same growing edge. So maybe I'll come back in a year and hopefully each of us will have carved out a little bit more time for that balcony time. I would say that you're doing it today though, so give yourselves a credit for that, right? Thinking about big picture planning. And then communications. And I think it was B put in the chat about digital curation. This is a little bit part of that. It is about communications, I think. I don't think this graphic exists on the Vibrant Faith website anymore, but it used to. And they used to, before COVID, we often didn't, many churches were not in the place to think about digital ministry at all, whether it was live streaming or, whatever it was. And then COVID, we all thought about it for a very long time. And then we got tired of thinking about it. And now it's like, well, what's the right place of digital ministry? And the right place and the right amount of digital ministry depends on your context, but it also depends on your goal. So digital ministry can be just like, hey, we have an event, come to it, you need to know about it, which is kind of the information and promotion. Then there's inspiration. Are you sharing, maybe a prayer of the week with your congregation via email or social media or however that looks? And then there's sort of what we're all focused on, right, is faith formation. And there's been a ton of grants and research and effort put into how do we use digital tools to get faith-forming activities into the homes of children. And how do we partner with parents on that? I think this is still a really big growing edge in the church. But as we think about communicating, it's helpful to think about, well, what is our goal in communicating? And it's all of these things, but not all of these things all the time. People need to know about the event, but also, what are we doing that actually enables prayer and scripture reading and conversation and all of those nurturing activities at home? I'm going to skip over that. That's just more about formation. So when you make a communications plan, think about your objective, and then what is the content that needs to go out. As you make a communications plan for the coming year, think about your rhythm of regular communication. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Maybe you have a weekly email or a monthly email, or how does that rhythm work for you and your congregation? How will you communicate with your volunteers, and how will you do that well? Visual communication, I think of it as the things that we put in the hallways. Maybe some of us still have bulletin boards, or maybe we have fancy screens with the slideshow that runs, whatever that visual piece looks like in your context. And then you've got the things that you need to, events that you need to plan. So as you think about your calendar, what does your communications calendar look like? Here are some things to think about. You can find this in the Sustainable Children's Ministry book. So here is an old weekly rhythm of communications when I was doing a lot more youth ministry at a previous church. But on Monday, I would post a blog post, and so that parents could read that about what did we do on Sunday. And then I made sure that we got all the upcoming events in the bulletin and those church channels. On Tuesday, we did a social media prayer of the week. Sometimes it just looked like this. And then Wednesday, someone else was writing an all church devotional that went out through email and social media. And then on Thursday, I was really intentional about, I think I was using Remind at the time, texting tools to make sure that the youth group students themselves all knew about the events. Again, this is going to look very different depending on your ministry, but it has helped me to think about, what am I doing communications wise, not only for the year, but each week, and carving out a little bit of time to make sure that these things happen. Because again, we're all dealing with busy schedules and distracted people. So making sure that they have the information, they don't always read it, or they don't always remember they read it. But having a solid communication plans minimizes that to the greatest extent possible. And then lastly, I'm all right, I'm on time. I'm going to have a few minutes for Q&A. There's so much I wanted to tell you all. You have a lot of tasks on your to-do list. They come from a variety of places. You've got special events that you plan. You've got the recurring weekly stuff. You've got congregational care that comes up. Maybe you have a student that, broke a leg and you need to, visit them or send them a card, whatever that looks like. You've got all these preventative maintenance things that we know are happening, especially right now at the end of the school year. And then my favorite category is this purple one in the middle. Could you just? I get so many wonderful and well-intentioned ideas from ministry leaders. Could you just plan a ... Or could you just? So that's another source of tasks. I try to filter those because those can easily be overwhelming. But all that to say is that your to-do list gets a lot of items put on it from a lot of different directions. And so you'll need some sort of system for managing your to-do list. This is a good time at the end of year to think, okay, does the tool that I'm using work really well? You're all highly organized, I know it. So, some people, pen and paper is the way to go, and that is fantastic. Some people need to have a digital tool that other ministry leaders have access to and you can collaborate in. I have another children's ministry staff person, so we have a shared to-do list that's digital. So the size of your team, how does your tool work with other systems you have? Can you prioritize your task list? And is it easy for you to use? If it's not easy for you to use, then you're not going to use it and it's not a good tool for you. So as you think about what the best tool for you might be, these are some things to think about. I will tell you that and so here's a few task, online kind of task management tools and project management tools. I don't have a lot of experience with Basecamp or Monday, or I think Trello is another one. I haven't used those. I found Asana a while ago and my life is in Asana, so I stick with Asana. Even in the free version, it allows me to create tasks by project. It allows me to create recurring events. So those things that I'm likely to forget about, like ordering the donkey for Palm Sunday, which I have to do in January, maybe even December. I never am thinking about Palm Sunday when the snow is still on the ground, but I have a recurring yearly thing to like reserve the donkey in January. It's things that I forget about. So I love Asana, and then I can actually assign tasks to other staff members, and they can assign tasks to me, and it works well. But it's not the simplest tool, but it's the simplest tool for us. So no product promotion, but those are that's some of the tools that I use. So that's kind of where we've been. A really quick, and I know I was talking fast, a really quick move through planning. So I wanted to ask and leave, not a lot of minutes, but a few minutes for Q&A. I'm going to check the chat here. Yeah, B had asked at the beginning, so type your questions in the chat or unmute, but I want to address this one question from B about digital curation. So I think your Michigan, your website, your children's ministry website that Kathy Pittenger leads, although maybe, yeah, Susan's shaking her head. If you look at playlists, so there's different topics. I mean, you all have so many, but there might be Advent or Lent or praying with kids. There's a million different topics. And then Kathy and others have curated the best resources that they've found online into one playlist. So it might be videos, it might be printable materials, it might be a list of questions. All of those things are in playlists. So check out your, and maybe Susan, you could put that in the chat. Thank you. So that's what I mean by digital curation, finding the best resources for a particular topic and then sharing them with your people.